when decorating your home, one of your first considerations must be the style and placing of your television set. Every Motorola, 4-way combination, stunning compact big screen table model, or any one of a handsome television consoles, whichever cabinet you choose will add to the beauty of your home. Will add to the beauty of your home.
What's tomorrow going to be like? What kind of world are we going to live in when we get our permanent furloughs? Super-speed highways? Plastic Packards? Streamlined cities? What does the future hold in store for us? To get a glimpse of that future, Army-Navy Screen Magazine presents a new department. Tomorrow, previewing our post-war world, the job opportunities, the new fields ahead. For the first in our Tomorrow series, let's look into a brand new development.
ISIL is as sophisticated and well-funded as any group that we have seen. They're beyond just a terrorist group. A terrorist group. They marry ideology, a sophistication of strategic and tactical military prowess. They are tremendously well-funded. Oh, this is beyond anything that we've seen. So we must prepare for everything, and the only way you do that is you take a cold, steely, hard look at it and get ready.
One of Oklahoma's senators says the rise of ISIS and other violent terrorist groups is putting our country in a dangerous position.
I am concerned, and I think all Americans should be concerned.
I guarantee you this is a problem that we will have to face, and we're either going to face it in New York City or we're going to face it here.
Fox 25's Phil Cross sat down with Senator Jim Inhofe, who says the public needs to know how real the threat is for a new attack on American soil.
There's no question but what the developments in Iraq and Syria, the development of a caliphate with the ISIS organization in charge is very much a threat to the United States, to our friends and allies, not only in the Middle East but in Europe. And when you see them behead an American reporter, as they did today, that's obviously a terrible development, but magnify that 1,000,000 times over, because that's what's in store for the rest of the world if we don't deal effectively with this crisis.
The seeds of 9/11s are being planted all over Iraq and Syria. You don't have to believe me, this is what they're telling you they're going to do.
Growing concern that the terror tirade in Iraq will soon be coming here to the United States.
They pose a greater threat today than they did 6 months ago, and we're taking it very seriously.
As the U.S. continues to carry out airstrikes against ISIS, they are also monitoring the possibility that the next generation of Islamic militants could come from within the United States border.
Sooner or later, some of them will get their hands on deadlier weapons.
Are you indicating, in fact, that we could be on path, or we are on track for something worse than 9/11?
9/11.
9/11?
I think that's a possibility. And, I can't say specifically at this point when something like that might happen.
My fellow Canadians, for the second time this week, there has been a brutal and violent attack on our soil. In fact, this will lead us to strengthen our resolve and redouble our efforts, and those of our national security agencies, to take all necessary steps to identify and counter threats and keep Canada safe here at home. Just as it will lead us to strengthen our resolve and redouble our efforts to work with our allies around the world and fight against the terrorist organizations who brutalize those in other countries with the hope of bringing their savagery to our shores. They will have no safe haven.
And they are rapidly developing a method of blowing up a major U.S. city.
Violence, Al-Qaeda forces,
terrorist attacks,
military action,
ISIS, Bin Laden,
ISIL,
ISIS,
terrorists,
Osama bin Laden,
terrorist organizations,
ISIS,
9/11
terrorist group,
national security,
9/11
beheading,
Islamic Jihad, Boko Haram, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, ISIL, Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda.
The acts of terror,
terrorist group.
This is
The
state
of the
world.
In effect, the United States created ISIS. Nothing like it existed before the American occupation. It was an insurgency that battened on the hatred of the Americans and the vulnerability and hatred of the Sunnis for the Shia. There's no way to understand it happening without the Americans there, because it built itself like a kind of bacterial host on the American occupation. We created it, it's ours, and now we're trying to deal with the consequences. The war in Iraq, in the streets of Baghdad, no less than in the halls of Congress or in the stump speeches of the campaign trail, is in its essence political, not military. Like the terrorists who hijacked American airliners and flew them into American buildings, the fighters daily ambushing American troops are attacking not American military power, but American will. And thanks to the way President Bush and his colleagues chose to build the case for war and the errors they've made in prosecuting it, American will is an increasingly vulnerable target. In the end, defeat or victory in Iraq will be judged not by who controls Baghdad, but by whether the war has left Americans more secure than they were before it was undertaken. The first weeks of the occupation, in which security in Baghdad collapsed, chaos ruled the streets, and the fledgling occupation authority daily issued conflicting statements and made promises it did not keep, were a fiasco. They proved an enormous boon to violent opponents, providing them in the lawless streets of post-war Iraq the political equivalent of a warm petri dish in which to grow. It had been based on the threat of weapons of mass destruction, which turned out not to have existed. It was based also on a promise given by the political leadership of the Bush administration to the American people that the war would be, as one Bush ally put it, a cakewalk. Both of those promises were proved in the first months of the war to be egregiously, tragically, terribly wrong. Suddenly, the Americans were caught in a kind of existential, lonely world of the present. Where are we? Why are we fighting? Why did we come here? When will we leave? The enemy in Iraq, in other words, is dynamic and changeable. A shadowy and loose group of forces made up of former officers and soldiers of the vast security and intelligence organs of the Ancien regime. Foreign-born jihadis, or ideological commandos, who have slipped into Iraq from Saudi Arabia, Syria, and other Islamic countries, determined to confront and defeat the United States. And perhaps increasingly, young, unemployed Iraqis, angry at the American occupation and the difficulties it has brought, eager to avenge a relative's death or a personal affront, or simply desperate to earn some easy money by hiring themselves out to attack Americans. Because ISIS, of course, is the child, the descendant of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, or Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia, or Al-Qaeda of the Two Rivers, whatever name you'd like to use. It is a result of Sunni hatred, dissatisfaction, and vulnerability at the new order in Iraq. That Iraqis loyal to a security-obsessed totalitarian regime of 3 decades would seek to fight the Americans who have overthrown it is not surprising. Nor should it be surprising that jihadis from outside and inside Iraq should seize the opportunity to attack infidels occupying an Islamic country. What is surprising is the degree to which the Americans, through their own lack of attention to the critical political tasks of the war's aftermath, have in effect assisted their efforts. What was the basic political task of the occupation of Iraq? It was to somehow switch power from the Sunni minority to the Shia majority, and to do it in a way that the Sunnis would accept it nonviolently. In fact, if you look at the early days of the occupation, everything the Americans did seems to have been pointed toward the opposite goal. The Americans acted again and again by dissolving the army, by de-Ba'athifying the country, by doing a number of very stupid policies. They acted again and again to enrage the Sunnis, to make them more vulnerable, to make them think they had to fight. Because a key part of the insurgency, even though we think now of ISIL as the Islamic State, that is, as mainly jihadist, in fact, it has a key cadre, a key level of functioning that comes from the Iraqi army, all of whom came from this relatively successful, very large army that we dissolved with very little thought beforehand and sent 400,000 young men onto the streets without any salaries and with simply their guns. So we humiliated these people. We laid the seeds down for the insurgency without a doubt.
So if you think if we walked away from this, didn't give them money today, it would be worse for us from a security standpoint?
I do. We're building a relationship that just did not exist. I said in our last trip when you were with me that we had a huge trust deficit, in part because the United States had, to be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting.
How?
Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now. Everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has failed to answer clear questions about his ill-defined military deployment in Iraq. Yesterday, Conservatives refused once again to answer in this House, but the member for Selkirk-Interlake stated on CPAC that the mission will end on October 4th. Will the Conservative government confirm that the 30-day Canadian commitment in Iraq will indeed end on October 4th?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's a great deal of confusion with respect to the NDP position on Israel. I wonder if the Leader of the Opposition could confirm for me whether Alex Anderson, who identifies himself as a fundraiser at the New Democratic Party, if he speaks for the NDP when he says, F the IDF and all who supports them, I'm sick and tired of the media BS trying to sell lies and hide a effing genocide. Does Alex Anderson speak for the NDP when he says these shameful things?
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, I can understand the confusion. We are in the Middle East and we are under the eyes, but we're talking about Iraq. It took over a week for the Prime Minister to answer a simple question about the number of troops involved in the Iraqi deployment. It now appears that Canadian soldiers may require visas approved by the Iraqi government. Since this military deployment is still ongoing, and since it's set to conclude in 12 days, precisely how many Canadian soldiers are on the ground in Iraq today?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what does the Leader of the Opposition not understand? That our friends in Israel are on the front lines combating terrorism, Mr. Speaker. So when people who work for the NDP, like Alex Anderson, who identifies himself as a fundraiser at Canada's NDP, calls that what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing a effing genocide, and calls the media BS for not supporting the fact that they call it a effing genocide. What does he not understand? Israel is on the front lines. Canada will continue to support our friends in Israel. We'll stand up for peace and security around the world. And unlike them, we're not confused by our position.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there are rules in the book about question period. You are our arbiter. We ask you to enforce the rules on relevant and on question period. When asked at Foreign Affairs Committee just a couple of weeks ago, the Minister said that a status of forces agreement with Iraq outlining operating rules for Canadian forces had not yet been completed. Has that agreement now been completed? And if so, when can Canadians see it?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, clearly the Leader of the NDP does not identify or understand the fact that our friends in Israel are on the front lines combating terrorism in the region, Mr. Speaker. That's why on this side of the House we support our friends in Israel, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the NDP, whose position is all over the place, Canada will stand up for Israel, will stand up for freedom around the world, Mr. Speaker. The NDP their supporter calls the NDP an effing IDF, and all those who support it, Mr. Speaker, they claim that the media are ignoring it, call it BS. We'll stand up for Israel. We'll stand up for our...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that does not speak very favorably about your neutrality in this House.
The world, a celestial body, the home of human civilization. A home, by definition, is a place of harmony with your surroundings, a place of origin and a social unit formed by people living together. It is an environment offering security and happiness, and a valued place to reside. So do we collectively treat the earth in this manner? From what we see across the world with poverty, pain, suffering, confusion, inequality, political reforms, economic imbalances, financial instabilities, protest movements, natural disaster, war, genocide, media manipulation, government corruption, and the list goes on, humanity is due for an entirely new reform and way of structuring our home, the earth. What is humanity to do about this?
This is James Wright Foley, an American citizen of your country. As a government, you have been at the forefront of the aggression towards the Islamic State. You have plotted against us and gone far out of your way to find reasons to interfere in our affairs. Today, your military air force is attacking us daily in Iraq. Your strikes have caused casualties amongst Muslims. You are no longer fighting an insurgency. We are an Islamic army and a state that has been accepted by a large number of Muslims worldwide. So effectively, any aggression towards the Islamic State is an aggression towards Muslims from all walks of life who have accepted the Islamic Caliphate as their leadership. So any attempt by you, Obama, to deny the Muslims their rights of living in safety under the Islamic Caliphate will result in the bloodshed of your people. The life of this American citizen, Obama, depends on your next decision.
This wouldn't be the first time that the authenticity of ISIS execution videos have been questioned, and not just by conspiracy theorists. An international forensic science company which has worked for police forces across Britain said that camera trickery and slick post-production techniques were used during the James Foley beheading, and that the video may have been staged. Videos featuring Japanese hostages held by ISIS were also suspected of being staged or heavily edited, with inconsistencies in shadows suggesting the scene was not recorded outside, but inside a film studio. So what do you think? Was the Jordanian pilot video staged in any way? And if so, why would ISIS need to fake it?
you have been at the forefront of the aggression towards the Islamic State.
Authorities are already investigating the possibility that the man heard in the Foley video might be from America's strongest ally.
From what we've seen, it looks increasingly likely that it is a British citizen.
The problem authorities are facing is how to track down citizens with potential ties to these terrorist groups.
The FBI is looking at data analytics. They're looking at mosques. They're looking at databases, no-fly lists, travel in particular. Young people just don't disappear into the Middle East for months or years at a time.
ISIS is already recruiting the next generation of militants in the U.S. through propaganda video. But new technology leads to new challenges.
We don't have a political police in this country, so the FBI, cannot go after people on Facebook and just simply knock on their doors, the ones that are suspicious.
ISIS recruiting efforts have already attracted American members.
We're tracking 100 Americans who are over there now fighting for ISIS.
Having an American citizen, fighting for them in Syria, Iraq is a legitimizing factor. They want to show that ISIS is a universal movement.
The FBI issued a bulletin on Friday warning law enforcement agencies to be aware of threats from ISIS and their efforts to garner support through social media.
They know how to make homemade devices, from materials they could obtain here, including the detonators. So they certainly have the capacity to launch an attack here.
American citizens have already been investigated for possible ties to Islamic militant groups. A North Carolina man was stopped in August at JFK Airport on a gun charge, but was questioned at length for tweets he sent supporting ISIS. And a Colorado woman was arrested by the FBI in April for conspiracy to provide material support to terrorists. Looking for suspicious activity, tweets and travel information might lead investigators to the next potential threat to the homeland.
As we look ahead and look forward, we are going to do what is necessary to protect Americans. And so if we see plotting against Americans, we see a threat to the United States emanating from anywhere, we stand ready to take action.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
And look, this is one time. Forget the conspiracy. Listen to our government agencies. These guys are telling the truth. There's no conspiracy here, folks. Just get your damn vaccine.
All right. Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Mercury-containing vaccines may help, not harm kids, according to 2 new studies in the journal Pediatrics. There have been widespread concerns that mercury-based preservatives in vaccines might impair the neurological development of children. These new studies suggest that the opposite, that the preservatives may actually be associated with improved behavior and mental performance.
I think people should be careful what they wish for on China. If China were to revalue its currency, or China is to start making, say, toys that don't have lead in them or food that isn't poisonous, their costs of production are going to go up, and that means prices at Walmart here in the United States are going to go up too. So I would say China is our greatest friend right now. They're keeping prices low, and they're keeping prices for...
The plan is as old as history, with its modern manifestation having reared its ugly head in 1776 when Adam Weishaupt, professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria, founded the Order of the Illuminati, the Enlightened Ones. The goal of the Illuminati was the creation of a new world order. This was to be accomplished by infiltrating all areas of society and destroying civilization from within. The public has been deluded about the material aims of a few and the very existence of the hidden rulers who sit at the very pinnacle of power and see themselves as lords of this planet. The purpose of government is inexorably tied to the purpose of life. The sum of good government is knowledge of the purpose of life and the administration of society towards that goal. If the men in leadership positions in the world do not know the objective of life, then they are not capable of administering a peaceful society. If, however, they do know, then what we see happening in the world is the deliberate attempt to undermine the primary objective of life.
this ISIS group has come out of nowhere, in effect, incredibly well armed, incredibly funded. I mean, I've seen figures like $2 billion at its disposal. And it's walking into towns in Iraq and taking them over. It's established itself at the key border crossings into Syria and into Jordan. And it's all happened really fast. The plan was to create a massive divide and rule conflict between the Shia Muslims and the Sunni Muslims. So what you have, therefore, is this ISIS that suddenly appeared with its grotesque violence that is representing Sunni Muslims. And then you have the regime currently in Iraq that is representing, in effect, Shia Muslims. And you have, just across the border, the center of the Shia Muslim world, and that's Iran. Iran, 89%, I think it is, of Iranian Muslims are Shia. Now, in the last little while, there's been this, apparently on the face of it, this strange change of direction by America in terms of Iran. They've spent all these years with Israel saying, well, you know, we must take out their nuclear facilities and these sanctions against them, and oh, they're terrible. And now, if you remember, in the last week or so, they've even been talking about maybe they ought to get into discussions with Iran and come to some agreement on how they deal with this ISIS situation. What they're doing is they're trying to draw Iran into this Sunni Shia conflict, like, you know, protect the Shia that this Sunni ISIS are threatening and overrunning at the moment. And once they get Iran pulled into that vortex, it ain't going to get out. Yeah. Then there's another aspect of this, which is a real red flag for me. And that is this ISIS organization is very extreme. And its very name, when you break down the wording, is describing its ambitions. And that's to take over Iraq, to take over Syria, and to take over what they call the Levant. And what does the Levant include? Israel. So here you have this extreme Muslim group, or actually army, actually saying in its own name that our intention is to take over the Levant, to take over Israel. And what it seems to me as I'm reading this is that they're all standing off to let this ISIS get a big foothold in that region. And then if it moves to the point where it starts to threaten Israel, then the button will be pressed. Then the Americans and NATO will come in because they're committed to protecting Israel's security. And then you'll start to see why that sliver of land called Israel, with less than 8 million people, has one of the best equipped armies in the world and a nuclear arsenal.
Why did the Prime Minister mislead Canadians about who proposed escalating Canada's involvement in Iraq?
The U.S. ambassador says the coalition's mission is clear.
What's the end game when it comes to fighting ISIS and the fight going on in Syria and Iraq?
Degrade and destroy ISIL.
Retired Major General Louis McKenzie says that's no easy feat. It will take time and more than airstrikes.
You are not going to succeed pushing anybody anywhere without boots on the ground. And well, it'll be the retrained Iraqi forces. Yeah, that went really well for the last 10 years. You know, that's going to take years.
The big question now, if Canada's role changes, will Parliament vote on it? The government has said a combat role would require a vote. If it does, when will that vote happen? Canada's current 30-day mission is up on October 4th, so decisions on changing or extending the mission will have to be made soon.
Yeah, good morning, Steve. And I think all we have to do is look at the words of Colonel Kenneth King, who's the former commander at Camp Bucca prison in Iraq. Let's see his experience. And that's the fear coming to a city, including New York, as a result of what they're doing. It's important to understand who al-Baghdadi is. He's got a PhD in Islamic studies from Baghdad University. He's considered one of the most brutal leaders in the world now. His nickname is the Invisible Sheikh. He was detained at Camp Bucca, as you know, and then pushed out of al-Qaeda in 2013. And now we know that there's a $10 million bounty for his death or capture. Eerily similar and perceived by many of the al-Qaeda and former al-Qaeda forces, including the people at ISIS, as the logical successor to Osama bin Laden. And a lot of foreign policy experts are saying that the similarities are too eerie and too disturbing in terms of the way that Afghanistan was going in the 1990s to the way that Iraq is now proceeding in 2014. We only have to look at the radio address that al-Baghdadi gave last January. This is disturbing. He said, "Our last message is to the Americans. Soon we will be in direct confrontation, and the sons of Islam have prepared for such a day. So watch, for we are with you watching."
It's all scary about this. So that's the guy who's running ISIS right now. This is the same guy we had in prison, and now we have let him loose.
And released, and allegedly made a threat at the time that he left Camp Bucca. Then we need to be on the defensive and the offensive to ensure safety in our cities. It's a continuing battle in this war on terror.
We are also learning more about the leader of this terror group, a man described as the new bin Laden, the heir to bin Laden. It turns out he had been in U.S. custody until 2009 over in Iraq, when he was then handed over to the Iraqi government as part of our troop drawdown. And then he was released. Now he has led this effort to create an Islamic caliphate, a nation state ruled by harsh, radical Islamic law, and dedicated to killing, quote, non-believers and spreading its power as far as it can.
The next 9/11 is coming from here.
That's a very serious.
That's what they say, and I agree with them.
You think that we could have another?
Oh, I think it's inevitable.
He told me and the soldiers that were around me, "I'll see you in New York."
That is just chilling.
This man, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, has his eye on New York and his intentions are evil. I'll see you guys in New York.
We are seeing within Canada the same rhetoric that occurred in America after the US government issued a false flag terror attack on 9/11 to pursue their agenda for a new world order.
Radical ideology of hate.
Terror of threats.
Terror.
Terror.
Terror. War on terrorism.
War against terrorism.
Global war on terror.
Terrorism. Terrorism.
Terrorism.
Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. The evil terrorists. 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 Terrorists.
Terrorists. Terrorists.
Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists.
Terrorists. Terrorists.
Terrorists.
Terrorists.
Terrorists. Terrorist attacks. National security terrorist organizations.
Now we are increasingly seeing the negative effects that this has had upon Canada and the best interest of the world and for its inhabitants. How do we stop war? How do we stop a control mechanism that has massive amounts of finance at its disposal? Now in Canada, with the recent controversial Bill C-51, this is becoming more evident.
As we know here in Canada, it only takes one gunman to kill and create panic. Our government has vowed to make it tougher for those plotting terrorist acts to carry out their plans. New anti-terror legislation is being rushed through Parliament right now. Critics say it is not getting the scrutiny it needs.
Currently, we are not able to prevent a high-risk traveler from boarding an airplane.
Blaney says that's why the government's new anti-terror laws are needed, insisting there's no time to wait.
It's simply reckless and irresponsible to try to ram it through.
The opposition wants a vigorous debate, but will likely get just 3 days for a committee to go over the bill. Not enough, according to this constitutional lawyer.
This is the most fundamental rearrangement of our national security architecture since the post 9/11 reform. So I don't understand what the rush is.
I'm worried about the bill, not least because there appears to be a determination to rush it through Parliament, and I don't have the impression the government is prepared to consider amendments, including regarding accountability.
The picture that emerges is that national security agencies have very broad, intrusive powers of surveillance. They can profile people. And I ask, is this the kind of society we want to live in?
Newly leaked RCMP documents refer to some environmentalists as a threat to Canada's security. The intelligence assessment describes some anti-pipeline and anti-oil sands activists as violent extremists. As Margot McDermott reports, that has some groups worried they'll become targets of CSIS surveillance under the government's new anti-terror bill.
Secret RCMP documents warn environmental groups are trying to disrupt the petroleum industry and could break the law. The January 2014 report lumps all groups against the oil industry together, describing them as a highly organized and well-financed anti-Canadian petroleum movement.
My guess is if the average citizen was told that they had 5 minutes left to live and they were alone in their house, a good percentage of Canadians would devote 2 or 3 of those last minutes on Earth to erasing their hard drive. Not because they're criminal, but because it might contain something that's, what's the expression I'm looking for? Nobody's business. And that includes the Minister of Public Safety, Vic Taves. Now, Vic's a nice guy, but he's got this thing. He likes to peek, or at least he wants to peek, into your hard drive. He wants to be able to get your computer's IP address without a warrant. He wants all of your computer online traffic recorded. It's his thing. Now, Vic says it's no big deal. It's like a phone book. Now, I trust Vic, I do, but I asked a computer geek friend of mine, and he says, no, it's nothing like a phone book. In fact, it's like a fingerprint, except it's a fingerprint that can tell Vic how much money you make, what you read, where you get your news, what you say to your best friend, what turns you on, and how you vote. Gee, is that all, Vic? Because that makes me uncomfortable. Now, Vic says we have a choice to make here. We can side with the Conservatives and let Vic peek, or we can side with the child pornographers. Now, unfortunately for Vic, he forgot one very important thing. Canadians aren't that stupid. And thank God, because Vic, you can call us all the names you want, but that doesn't change the fact we're not going to let you peek. That doesn't make us criminal, it makes us Canadian. It's why we shut our blinds at night. The state has no business in the hard drives of the nation. You want to peek, Vic? Convince a judge, get a warrant.
The most serious legislation must meet the most serious challenge in depth. When legislation seeks to balance between our security and our liberties and perhaps places the latter in jeopardy over the former, the scrutiny of it, the debate over it, must be full and unrestricted. Every clause should be fought over. Every potential advance on the liberty of the citizen should be examined as to its ultimate necessity. The powers and agencies to be granted license to monitor and investigate outside or beyond the protections normally in place must be put to the fullest parliamentary, media, and democratic testing. This is even more true when events, recent or past, distant or near, give the greater weight to what we fear over what in normal times we most tenaciously value. Paraphrasing Thomas Jefferson, this thought is the right one. It is preferable to be exposed to the dangers attending too much liberty than those attending too small a degree of it. Thus, in the current debate, while Mr. Mulcair and his NDP might be seen as against the tide, taking the stand he has is the right course. We should not abridge our liberties or set up mechanisms to abridge them without the fullest and most strenuous scrutiny and opposition we are capable of, and all of the oversight which our situation allows. For The National, I'm Rex Murphy.
C-51 goes too far. The definitions are too vast. The scope goes way beyond anything that's required, or at least for which any evidence has been brought forward by the government. They're also incapable of saying what's not there now that they're adding with this bill. I've asked Mr. Harper any number of times this week to give examples. He can't do that. I asked the Minister of Justice to provide examples of what it means to allow CSIS to disrupt. They can't explain that either. You know, if you go back to the days after 9/11, you remember when there was a bill brought in at the time and we were asking tough questions, everybody saying, this is Canada, nothing bad can come of this. Why would you be afraid of giving more powers? Then we went through MyRRR, we had a Royal Commission of Inquiry. We said, well, especially if there's going to be trading of information, you have to be super careful. And that's what's missing here. So we're saying to the government, start making your case. Start taking care of some of the things that are not in there. Mr. Obama, for example, is going after radicalization. So there's nothing in the Canadian bill on de-radicalization. We should be working with communities, so it goes too far on the one hand, and it's missing some important elements on the other hand.
I know that you said that it's still a bit vague what is in the bill, but more specifically, what are you against right now that is in Bill C-51?
It would allow the government to interfere with any group or individual, for example, contemplating protesting a pipeline, because that's an infrastructure that's caught by the bill. That's the type of example that we look at and say, whoa, this goes really beyond anything that anyone in Canada would have contemplated. You're allowed to have an expression of an opinion against the government's economic program. And they're saying, yet, if you have that sort of opinion now and you're acting on it, then you could be caught up in this web of investigation. And we're saying that that simply goes too far. So the NDP is standing up on a question of principle. We have convictions, but we also have the courage of those convictions. Now, the Conservatives and Liberals will be voting together to try to get this bill adopted. The NDP is going to stand up, propose amendments, hope that they won't do the same thing they did this week, which is to cut short debate, allow experts to come in. And, of course, if the Conservatives and Liberals push this thing through the way it is, the NDP will once again stand up and vote against it.
But environmental organizations worry their legitimate concerns are now labeled a security threat by police.
It's basically saying anyone who's ever signed a petition against a pipeline can be viewed as a potential extremist.
Some of the radical groups in Canada.
The federal government has used similar language in the past, calling environmental groups foreign-funded radicals who want to destroy the economy.
We must take further action.
The documents were leaked at the same time that the government's proposed anti-terrorism law is making its way through Parliament. That law makes it illegal to interfere with any critical infrastructure or the country's economic stability.
C-51 creates 2 new laws and changes 15 others. Critics say the bill gives Canada's spy agency CSIS more powers without more checks. It allows government agencies to share your personal information more easily and maybe even with a foreign country, and broadens the definition of terrorism so much that free speech and protesters could be at risk.
We are coming and we will destroy you.
One pill makes you larger and one pill makes you small, and the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall. And if you go chasing rabbits and you know you're going to fall, tell 'em a hookah smoking caterpillar has given you the call. Call Alice when she was
60s and 70s were turbulent political times, and now compelling evidence has emerged that points to a sinister coalition between the United States government and organized crime, set up specifically to murder prominent leaders of the new youth culture, including rock musicians.
Jimi Hendrix was killed for two reasons. First of all, he had made statements in the teen press calling for the Black Panthers to go to Washington, D.C. and shoot the place up. Secondly, he had done a benefit for Bobby Seale and the Chicago 8. And that got the attention of the FBI and a program called COINTELPRO, which was a surveillance and assassination program. And it led to the murder of 28 Black Panthers. Tupac Shakur makes 29 because he was a Black Panther. Hendrix linked up with the Black Panthers, and for that reason, he was a dead man.
Since his death, vital questions remain unanswered.
Hey, Joe, where you going with that gun in your hand?
Since 1970, declassified government documents, new witness statements and pathological evidence have revealed a much clearer picture. It is now clear that Hendrix was not only aware that his life was in danger, but that he had deep, strong premonitions of his own death.
You know, I thought I'd mess around with another man, and that ain't too cool.
He looked me square in the eyes and said, "I won't be here." And I said, "What do you mean won't be here?" He says, "It's because I won't be in my body, I'll be dead."
Out of the blue, he said to the reporter, "I doubt I'll live to be 28 years old."
I heard you shot your woman down, you shot her down.
I'd asked him would he be going back to Seattle. He said, next time I go to Seattle, it'll be in a pine box.
The Jimi Hendrix experience is over. The acid rock musician died today in a London hospital, apparently from an overdose of drugs. During his short career, Hendrix flailed his electric guitar into some of the most unusual sounds of an unusual music. A report now from ABC's Gregory Jackson.
If you're much over 30, the odds are you never heard of Jimi Hendrix, or only dimly, perhaps a loud voice on the car radio. But take it for fact, in just the past 4 years, Jimi Hendrix became one of the best-known, highest-paid artists in recording history, an astonishing performer whose on-stage gyrations could make Elvis Presley look like a PE teacher. And it may well be that the story of Jimi Hendrix is a small picture of the overall explosive power and wealth of rock. The son of a Seattle gardener, James Marshall Hendrix quit school at 16, but before he was 20, he was touring the country as a backup guitarist for other rock groups. In 1966, a manager discovered him in a Greenwich Village bar, took him to Europe, formed a group, and just 9 months later, Jimi Hendrix returned world famous. At rock festivals, Hendrix was paid $50,000 for a single performance. His albums sold in the millions. He should have been a millionaire. It's not known whether he saved his money, but it is known that today, Jimi Hendrix is dead, an overdose. He was 28. This is Gregory Jackson, ABC News, New York.
The autopsy is very, very questionable because it basically says that he died in his own vomit, okay? And a later study revealed that it was actually drowning, with large amounts of red wine, okay? And then later on, you have this policy of defamation or degradation, whatever term you want to apply to it, in which the target then is smeared posthumously.
Discreditation of Jimi Hendrix began immediately after his death. Newspapers around the world reported that he died of a heroin overdose. And of course, it's well known that Jimi Hendrix didn't take heroin. He didn't indulge in it. He didn't care for it. He was a psychedelics man, right? So he didn't die of heroin. There was no heroin in his blood, right? Yet the press made this claim.
It suited the US government, the mafia, and in particular, Michael Jeffrey, for Jimi to be neutralized. But just how did Jimi Hendrix die?
All right, now it's been said for 30 years that Jimi Hendrix choked on his own vomit, It was said that he died of a heroin overdose. Of course, none of that's true. He didn't choke to death on his own vomit. Something had to make him sick, right? So now it's known that he took 9 Vesperex tablets. These are sleeping pills the night that he died. Now, it's been said that he died from an overdose of barbiturates. The problem is Jimi Hendrix was a chronic insomniac. He was used to barbiturates, and the Vesperex that he took really had very little effect on him. He took 2 tablets, he didn't feel a thing, couldn't go to sleep. He had taken an amphetamine capsule at a party the night before. So the 9 Vesperex tablets he took really had no connection to his ultimate end. But when he was wheeled into the emergency room, his throat was cleared, and the physician wrote that great masses of red wine came gushing out of his stomach and his lungs, right? So as I reenact the death of Jimi Hendrix, he must have been held down, a gallon of wine poured down his throat until he drowned. There were only 20 milligrams of alcohol in his blood when he was brought to the emergency room, which means there wasn't even enough time for that alcohol to enter his system. So the cause of death was drowning, and it looks to me like it was a forced drowning.
I think all our society is run by insane people for insane objectives. You know, and I think that's what I sussed when I was 16 and 12 way down the line, but I expressed it differently all through my life. It's the same thing I'm expressing all the time, but now I can put it into that sentence that I think we're being run by maniacs for maniacal ends, you know. If anybody can put on paper what our government and the American government, etc., and the Russian, Chinese, what they are actually trying to do, you know, and what they think they're doing, I'd be very pleased to know what they think they're doing. I think they're all insane, you know, but I'm liable to be put away as insane for expressing that. You know, that's what's insane about it.
Every country's had a violent revolution for one reason or the other. Not one of them has the freedom we're all talking about. So we're saying give peace a chance, you know, like nobody's ever done it before. And it's not a matter of, we're not thinking in terms of 10 years, we're thinking in terms of peace forever, you know. And everybody's talking about now. I want peace now. We can get peace now if we want it now. And the left wing talk about giving the power to the people. You know, anybody knows that the people have the power. All we have to do is awaken the power in the people. The people are unaware. It's like they're not educated to realize that they have power. They put the politicians in power. They vote for the local mayor. The people do it. But the system is so geared that everybody believes that just the father will fix everything. The father being the government. Government will fix everything. It is all government's fault. You know, shake your fist at the government. Well, we are the government. The people are the government, and the people have the power, but we must try and make them aware of this.
And Yoko was telling me about this great old ancient Chinese book, which tells you how to fight a battle, you know. And it says the battle is always lost within the castle, you know, like America's falling within, not from the commies coming. That it's falling apart inside. And this book on how to fight the good fight says that never have every door shut. The enemy then will... Everybody's going to come round and attack. But if you leave one door open, you know where they're going to come in, and then you get them. So intuitively, we're doing that. And we leave a door open. They're so busy shouting about haircuts and genitals and naked and long hair that they concentrate their ammunition there. We know where it comes from, and we get on with the job of selling or doing whatever we're doing. And I believe that. You leave the door open, man, and that's where the door they'll come in, you know.
As a Beatle, we made it, and there was nothing to do. You know, we had money, we had fame, and there was no joy, you know. And then I met Yoko, and she was making it as an avant-garde artist, and we both tried to find something we had in common, a common goal in life, because she couldn't rock and roll with me, and I couldn't avant-garde with her. I mean, we can, but that's what we thought at the time. So we decided the thing we had in common was love, and from love came peace. So we decided to work for world peace.
And how do you do that?
We do it by the advertising method, we believe that today's society, advertising is the thing politicians use and commercial companies use, the Beatles use it, John and Yoko should use it. Our product is peace.
Of less words and more peace. I think the only way to do it is Gandhi's way. And that's non-violent, passive, positive, or whatever they called it those days. You know. We're selling it like soap, you know. And you've got to sell and sell until the housewife thinks, oh, well, there's peace or war. That's the two products. Peace.
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 Peace, 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 peace.
Peace in your mind, peace on earth, peace at work, peace at home, peace in the world.
It's to try and get people orientated to think peace, like eat for peace, breathe for peace, and dance for peace, and make love for peace, you know. To just have the peace like a mantra going round and round in your head. War is a game that's gone too far, you know. It's just like we've all just woken up one morning and thought, is it a dream, is it a nightmare, what's been going on? And we're all just trying to make the next day a bit better. Oh yeah. Don't want to waste all this film on our face, do we? We specifically did the poster event around the world for Christmas to try and get at least one plug-in for peace on earth at Christmas, because that's what it's about. And happy birthday, Christ, you know, is what it's about.
If you had one wish for Christmas time, what would it be?
Peace.
Peace on earth. Yeah.
And love.
Peace on earth. That implies no violence, no starving children, no violent minds, no violent households, no violence, no frustration, no fear. If some housewife is against war, just put it in the window, you know, just to let her neighbours know or her husband know. You know, you've got to start on the home ground, like convert your parents. We think we have the right to have a say in the future, and we think the future is made in your mind. It says it, you know, war is over if you want it.
On the record, Jim Morrison's 1971 death was from natural causes. But off the record, there have been numerous legends associated with his passing. Fellow Doors member Ray Manzarek has heard them all.
Well, here are the possibilities in terms of Jim Morrison's death. One, he died of natural causes and self-induced excess. Or Jim was murdered. Who knows what the CIA might have been capable of back then? Or Jim Morrison staged the whole thing.
To this day, questions still linger regarding Jim Morrison's death, stemming from his wild and unpredictable behavior.
The idea of becoming an adult was abhorrent to him. He just couldn't do it. Becoming an adult meant putting on the yoke of responsibility, and he was the wild child.
Wild child, full of grace.
Morrison's rebellious nature did not endear him to law enforcement. After a confrontation with a policeman during a New Haven concert in December 1967, he was charged with indecent and immoral exhibition. In a similar incident in Miami 2 years later, the singer was arrested for indecent exposure, making headlines around the world.
Police were busting us. Jim was arrested on stage in Miami and New Haven. It turned into absolute insanity and chaos, and all we wanted to do was rock and roll and poetry.
From December 1967 through August 1970, Morrison was arrested 5 times. But the artist who called himself the Lizard King lived life with no regrets. Those who knew him say he felt he only had a limited time in this world. By the time Jim Morrison was 27, the Doors were true rock legends with 8 top 40 hits and a fanatical following. The singer, however, was reportedly growing weary of the rock lifestyle. Jim thought himself a poet first and foremost, and he found playing the role of rock god suffocating. Jim confided to his friend Cynthia Summers.
Even though the rest of the world kind of perceives him as being the huge rock star that he wasn't happy with that. The thing that he felt was his real calling was to write poetry. And at heart, he had the soul of a poet.
In early 1971, Morrison moved to Paris with his common-law wife, Pamela Courson.
Jim Morrison said, I'm going to Paris to get away for a little while. I want to get my head together. I want to write some poetry. And I said, that's incredible. Paris is perfect.
Look into your eyes again.
I think what gave Jim Morrison the most joy was when he wrote his poetry. He was very well read, and he was a craftsman with words.
But Jim's affair with the pen was short-lived. On July 3rd, Jim Morrison was found slouched in his bathtub, dead of an apparent heart attack. From the beginning, his death was shrouded in mystery.
Our manager goes over there, and then he calls me 3 days later and said, we just buried Jim Morrison this morning. I said, well, how did he look? He said, I don't know. He said, I never saw the body. It was a sealed coffin. And I said, time out. You buried a sealed coffin in Père Lachaise Cemetery, and you never saw Jim Morrison's body? He said, no.
In February 1971, Jim Morrison, the 27-year-old icon of the Doors, moved to Paris to get in touch with his poetry roots. But on July 3rd, Morrison was found dead in his bathtub. He had died of an apparent heart attack. Jim's friends and family back in the States were mystified by the lack of details concerning his death.
The French death certificate merely said his heart stopped. But of course, what caused his heart to stop? No one ever found out. If the death certificate on Jim Morrison had said he died of excess, I would have said yes. I can understand that.
Pamela Courson was the only reported witness to his death. She alone of Jim's friends saw the body before it was buried in Paris's famed Père Lachaise Cemetery. Courson may have been able to answer some questions, but she died before Manzarek or anyone had a chance to talk to her.
Pamela died very shortly after that, maybe lived a year or two after Jim. I never got to ask her directly what happened. I couldn't do that. I couldn't bring myself to confront his weeping widow lover.
Conspiracy expert Jonathan Venkin suggests that there might have been another explanation for Jim's death.
There was no real official inquest into his death. I mean, even for someone who lived a life like Jim Morrison lived, it's unusual for someone to die of a heart attack at that young age. So, you know, maybe it was a drug overdose, but of course you then get the conspiracy theories that perhaps it was murder, or perhaps he faked his own death, and this is still alive.
Of all these possibilities, Manzarek doesn't believe that Jim Morrison overdosed.
The police inspected his body. There were no, tracks on his arms, no needle marks. It was not a drug overdose.
What about the murder theory? And if Morrison was murdered, who would have killed a rock star? Some die-hard fans believe that he was the victim of a government conspiracy. Like many rock artists in the early 70s, Morrison had become increasingly radical as the war in Vietnam dragged on.
I was in World War II, fella, and I served for years. I know what it's about. What a Cuban doing? I have a son that's going to go into the army.
Feeding the rumors of a government conspiracy was the fact that Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin had died less than a year before. Many fans found it strangely coincidental that three hugely influential artists had all died within months of each other.
There is a popular belief that somehow the establishment conspired to either manipulate or squelch the youth movement of the 60s, not just the rock stars, but of course the Martin Luther Kings and the Malcolm X's. It's not that great of a leap of faith to think that there was some sort of program to actually kill these people. I don't think that's terribly unreasonable.
If there was a conspiracy, and if they did plan on doing it, the reason they did it is because they represented the three archetypes of American youth. The young black man, the young black prince, dressed like a gypsy, singing songs of love and psychedelic madness and beauty. Janis Joplin, the woman, the female principal, singing her heart out, singing the blues. And Jim Morrison, the heir apparent to the throne. He was the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant prince. There's a coffin in Père Lachaise Cemetery that may or may not contain the remains of James Douglas Morrison. And that coffin, theoretically, is being taken out of the ground on July 6th or 7th, the year 2001. Jim Morrison is going to be plucked out of the cemetery, and that casket is going to be moved and taken away. Doors fans from all over the world are going to be there screaming, "Open the coffin, open the coffin, open the coffin." I'm going to be there with him. Open the coffin. I don't believe that Jim Morrison is in there. I want to see Jim Morrison in there.
What will we find when Jim Morrison's coffin is removed from Père Lachaise? Will we finally know the truth about this rebellious poet who became a rock star? Until then, he will continue to mystify us in death as he did in life.
Vietnam is not our war. We must say no. Are we gonna go? Hell no, we won't go. 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 Hell no, we won't.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace.
Anti-war demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in mass marches, rallies, and demonstrations. Central Park is the starting point for the parade to the UN building. The estimated 125,000 Manhattan marchers include students, housewives, beatnik poets, doctors, businessmen, teachers, priests, and nuns. Makeup and costumes were bizarre.
Fathers of this country never cared for me. They kept my ancestors shackled up in slavery. And Uncle Sam never did a damn thing for me. Except lie about the facts in my history. Now I'm sitting here mad cause I'm unemployed. But the government's glad cause they enjoy when my people are down so they can screw us around. Time to change the government now. No more.
I'm a thug and I rap about the oppressed fighting back. Yes, my raps are filled with rage.
One of these days we gotta bust back for the homies.
You have to be logical. You know, if I know In this hotel room, they have food every day. And I'm knocking on the door every day to eat. And they open the door, let me see the party, let me see like them throwing salami all over just like throwing food around. But they're telling me there's no food in here. You know what I'm saying? Every day. I'm standing outside trying to sing my way in. You know what I'm saying? We are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. After about a week, that song is gonna change to we hungry, we need some food. After 2-3 weeks, it's like, give me all the food, breaking out the door. And after a year, then you just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm picking the lock, coming through the door, blasting, you know what I'm saying? It's like you hungry, you reached your level, you don't want any more. We asked 10 years ago. We was asking with the Panthers. We was asking with them, with civil rights movement. We was asking, now those people that were asking, they're all dead and in jail. So now what do you think we're gonna do? Ask?
I put my gun away and grab my AK. It's getting hectic. I can't call it. House full of alcoholics. Now a nigga's under pressure. It's too much money here. I mean, nobody should be hitting lotto for $36 million and we got people starving in the streets. That is not idealistic, that's just real. That is just stupid. There's no way Michael Jackson should have, or whoever Jackson, should have $1,000,000 billion and then there's people starving. There's no way. There's no way that these people should own planes and their people don't have houses, apartments, shacks, drawers, pants. I know you're rich. I know you got $40 billion, but can you just keep it to one house? You only need one house. And if you only got 2 kids, can you just keep it to 2 rooms? I mean, why have 52 rooms and there's somebody with no room? It just don't make sense to me. It don't. And then these people celebrate Christmas. They got big trees, huge trees, all the little trimmings. Everybody got gifts, and then somebody's starving. And they're having a white Christmas. They're having a great Christmas, eggnog and the whole 9. That's not fair to me. I think that when there's hopelessness, people revolt. Because it's like there's nothing that's like, it's like we're going, is America gonna help us ever? Because I mean, we know for a long time they haven't. Are they ever? And it's like all these things are showing us no. And there's somebody going, no, they're not gonna help you. No, they're not gonna help you. And then of course, we seeing, no, they're not helping us. It all comes down to we gotta survive. We got to survive here in this country. Because I'm not going back to Africa. We gotta survive here. And for us to survive here, white folks, black folks, Korean folks, Mexican folks, Puerto Ricans, we gotta understand each other. We gotta take a bigger chance. And when I say Americans, people think I'm talking about Uncle Sam. I mean like actually Uncle Sam with the gray hair and the flag. I mean you, the guy, you, the mechanic, wherever, you. I mean, you need to do something.
So then I started thinking, because the art school I went to was mostly for white kids and rich minorities. So I started going, damn, man, I would have been a totally different person had I not been exposed to these things.
I need money. I used to be a stick-up kid, so I think of all the devious things I did.
Hell no, I was living in the ghetto. We didn't have any lights and electricity. We was about to get evicted.
We want homes. We want heat. We want lights. We want something to do for our children.
I thought, we're not being taught to deal with the world as it is. I think that rich people should live like poor people and poor people should live like rich people, and it should change every week.
Hunger only for a taste of justice. Hunger only for a world of truth, 'cause all that you have is your soul.
The president stirred up a hornet's nest earlier this week when he suggested the problems of the hungry came about because they were uninformed about where to go for help.
I mean, how can Reagan live in the White House, which has a lot of rooms, and there'd be homelessness? And he's talking about helping homelessness.
I don't believe that there is anyone that is going hungry in America simply by reason of denial or lack of ability to feed them. It is by people not knowing where or how to get this help.
Why can't he take some of them people off the street and put them in his White House? Then he'll have people from the streets to help him with his ideas. They haven't been homeless forever. They've done things in society, but then the White House would be a little tainted because he doesn't want to get dirty.
Well, come on, all of you big, strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books and pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the we all gonna die. Now come on, Wall Street, don't be slow. Man, this is war a go-go. There's plenty good money to be made, supplying the army with the tools of the trade. Just hope and pray that if they drop the bomb, we're dropping on the Viet Cong. And it's 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7, open up the pearly gates. Well, ain't no time to wonder why we all gonna die. Now come on, generals, let's move fast. Your big chance is here at last. Now you can go out and get those reds, cause the only good commie is one that's dead. And you know that peace can only be won when you're blowing them all, the kingdom comes. Sing it! 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for?
Kept my history a mystery, but now I see the American dream wasn't meant for me. Cause lady liberties and hypocrisy lies to me. Promising freedom, education, equality.
I want people to know is that don't support the phonies. Support the real. You know what I mean? How can these people be talking about how they so real and they don't care about our communities? How can they be talking about what they, all this, you know, the hood, blah, 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 blah. They don't care about our communities. You know what I mean? Listen to the words that people say in their lyrics and tell me if that's real to you. You know what I mean? Listen to what they saying. Don't just bob your head to the beat. Peep the game. And listen to what I'm saying and hold us accountable for it.
So then there's this big conspiracy amongst a judge, a very well-known, prominent judge here in Seattle, and a bunch of other people who had ties with Hollywood, and they basically just set her up and ruined her life, you know? They, you know, had some pictures taken of her when she was arrested for drunk driving, and it was a big, huge scandal, and she eventually was sent to a mental institution and given a lobotomy and raped every day for years, and just totally abused, and ended up like working at a Four Seasons restaurant alone and dying by herself.
There's a Bainbridge Island. That's where she was institutionalized, right over there.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole broken down like infirmary there.
For years, every night there were lines of custodians, friends, and people, you know, part of the staff who would wait in line to rape her every day. You know, she went through a lot of shit. And it just disgusts me, you know, to know that there are some of the people that are part of that conspiracy are living here in Seattle in their comfortable, cushy little homes with their families. And, you know, it's 40 years after the fact, and it's just
He's a just God,
makes me
not a
want to
fair
kill
one.
him. Yeah.
And they're still
That's
living
what the
here
Christians
as good
say.
citizens.
God, why was there Auschwitz? Well, I'm a just God, not a fair one.
America is so obsessed with bad breath and with underarm deodorant. These are the biggest problems in the world. If you watch television at prime times, advertising is not concerned about poverty, not concerned about race oppression, not concerned about the police, but the biggest problem is your hair groomed, and what's it like under your arms, and do you have bad breath? And this is the American obsession. And so I think that a generation of kids which says, we don't care about your concepts of cleanliness is a revolutionary generation.
Uncovered a 2006 study written for the U.S. Special Operations Command that suggests the military should clandestinely recruit or hire prominent bloggers. The report stated, quote, hiring a block of bloggers to verbally attack a specific person or promote a specific message may be worth considering. The report also suggested the Pentagon hack blogs that promote messages that are antithetical to U.S. interests. The report stated, quote, hacking the site and subtly changing the messages and data merely a few words or phrases may be sufficient to begin destroying the blogger's credibility with the audience.
The average American would be so shocked to find out there's something called COINTELPRO, the FBI's covert action programs against American citizens. Now, this Senate report tells what the FBI was doing against the American citizens, literally. Here's their statement. COINTELPRO began in 1956, in part because of the frustration with the Supreme Court rulings limiting the government's power to proceed overtly against dissident groups. It ended in 1971 with the threat of public exposure. The Bureau conducted, their terms, a sophisticated vigilante operation aimed squarely at preventing the exercise of First Amendment rights of speech and association.
This guy's name is Nico, and his friend Ryan, they're provocateurs. That guy was wearing a dinosaur outfit, a full lizard dinosaur outfit, holding a No Planes Hit the Building sign. So, and standing with our group, trying to make it look like he was with us. So their job is, and I don't know who's paying them, but their job, self-appointed or otherwise, is to make the 9/11 truth movement look crazy.
Recording your face. I'm recording everything. Yes, no, no, you know how much more fucking supper excellence we got. And you think that's you don't fucking touch me. Don't fucking touch me. Get your hands off.
Why did you do how much is your soul worth? It's more worth than yours. How much rain will pay you? Can you ask serious questions? Who's paying me?
Hey,
Back that shit up right now. Where's the gun? If you ever touch me again, I'll fire his finger on again.
Hey, I'd like to press assault charges. They're ignoring me.
Yeah, they sure ignored you, man.
We showed them the video of the guy assaulting me. I said I wanted to press assault charges. Excuse me! Excuse me! I just stepped up to them to ask them what was going on, and they just walked away from me again. By law, they should have that man in handcuffs. We have the video evidence of him assaulting someone. I lodged a complaint. We have witnesses. I said I want him taken away for assault. Nothing was done. The police just ignored me and just walked away.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
We don't know exactly who is responsible at this point, but I think that thinking of Bin Laden as possibly being involved is also something that is very plausible.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
That's when the tower began to collapse.
I was looking in the viewfinder, and I just saw this reverse mushroom cloud billowing down, and I realized my proximity, and immediately just turned and started running north.
Yes, Peter, it's Don Daly down here. I'm 4 blocks north of the World Trade Center. The second building that was hit by the plane has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
Mystery death of a young man in Baltimore police custody. The autopsy on this 25-year-old is now complete. The names of the officers involved in his arrest released. But more information has not led, though, to any more clarity as far as how this 25-year-old suspect, Freddie Gray, broke his neck after Baltimore police arrested him. This is back on April 12th. He died a week later. Now, as we mentioned a second ago, the department has suspended these 6 officers with pay. They've released their names, their ages, charges, how long they've been on the force, but officials didn't specify on the reasons why. However, the mayor of Baltimore did tell CNN this.
We know that he asked for medical attention. We know that that medical attention was not immediately requested for him. We know that was a mistake.
That conclusion based on the fact that Gray asked for medical help more than once while being transported in a van. In fact, city and police officials revealed Gray requested his inhaler, his asthma inhaler, at the same time officers called for the van. They also disclosed that Gray was put in leg restraints, but officials say they do not know how or when Gray's spinal cord was severed. And what's more, Gray's autopsy revealed his spinal injury was the only trauma to his body.
There was no physical bodily injury that we saw, nor was it evident in the autopsy of Mr. Gray. None of his limbs were broken.
CNN has affiliate WJZ has obtained amateur video that provides a new, closer angle to Gray's arrest. Warning, the video is tough to watch.
Shorty, that was after they tased out him like that. Man, I've been recording. I've been recording. I've been recording it. What car they come out of, yo?
He on a bike, yo, right there. Him right there. He on a bike.
I got it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, yo.
Get his badge, number his chump badge.
After they did tase yo like that, you wonder why he can't use his legs. Yeah, I sure will. I sure will.
We've been living in poverty since I can remember. They don't tell you that. They don't tell you that there's no jobs here. I look at our police, Baltimore City Police, as bullies. And this is why I feel that the rioting and the burning of buildings is needed, only because I look at it as a kid. And they bully you every day when you go to school. And if you walk up to your bully peacefully, which is what everybody say, we should be peaceful. If you walk up to your bully peacefully and say, hey man, can you please stop bullying me every day I come to school? I promise you, he will keep bullying you every day you come to school. Now when you pick up something and you knock him upside his head, it gives him a different perspective. He says, oh, okay, now he's fighting back. Maybe I should stop bullying him before I end up here. And so that's what this situation is. This is us knocking the bully upside his head. As a city, we all came together and took part in peaceful protests and peaceful marches and things of that nature. What you didn't see was, you know, other, what could I call them, people antagonizing us to basically get a negative reaction.
Do you mean the police?
The police, as well as some outsiders who...
People who agree with the police behavior and agree with the harm in African American people. Those people. I'm not going to characterize people in that way, but we have to be honest here and say the truth. It's a lot of people who agree with African American brutality. You have those people, and they are the majority. In Baltimore? In Baltimore and all over.
I'm not going to incriminate myself, but I participated. I was in the middle of North and Fulton Avenue Monday, and you see a bunch of kids out there breaking in the stores. But if we were breaking into some Asian's bar and stealing their liquor or whatever it is that they have insured that will get paid for and replaced anyway, I mean, I don't look at that as so degrading or hurting our cause. It's a black-owned store right next door to the bar on North and Fulton Avenue that is untouched. It's a cell phone store. They sell mobile devices and things of that nature. It's black-owned. It was untouched. I'm saying if we had more black-owned businesses, we wouldn't be as destitute as we are
for change.
Again, I don't support violence. I see both sides. I'm always going to see both sides because I'm African American as well. So I really didn't understand the reason and the concept of throwing rocks and hurting the police and things like that until I started to speak to other people and listen to their opinion and how they are kind of just fed up. You know what I mean? Like the police is using violence towards us. Why can't we use it towards them?
That's right.
Let's show them how it feels to be beat up and attacked and hurt. You know what I mean? And so even though, again, I don't support violence, but honestly, you have to come to a point where something has to be done.
Yeah.
Enough is enough.
We weren't out there hurting each other for once. You know, normally black crime occurs all the time here, but I can promise you there's been no murders within the last, you know, however many days, black on black involved anyway, because we're all coming together at this point, and that's what makes me feel good. We're just trying to get attention. And if it takes us to burn this whole city down to get attention, we're gonna do that.
Intellectually, having no, don't walk away once we start talking. That's the problem. You're not talking, you're screaming. Because you want to report that we're thugs and we're breaking shit down. You got these two big black dudes protecting you from all these black folks. We're the ones that need protection. Report for us. You're working for Fox News. Adam Jackson just went on Sean Hannity. Why are you running away? I'm not running.
He's running. He got Geraldo on the right, y'all. Look at this. He got Geraldo on the right.
Talk to me. Just talk to me. Just talk to me.
Hey, Geraldo, we only need
conversation. Yeah, because you're not replying. Because we are angry. But listen, a black man can raise his voice. A black man can raise his voice, and you don't have to be intimidated. Because I want you and Fox News to get out of Baltimore City. Because you're not here reporting about the boarded up homes and the homeless people under MLK. You're not reporting about the poverty levels up and down North Avenue. 2 years ago, when the 300-man march, we marched from the top of Hilton to from Hilton and North to Milton and North, you weren't here. But you're here for the black riots that happened. Right? You're not here for the death of Freddie Gray. You're here for your story. No, I want to talk to you without the cameras. Hey, this is not for YouTube. This is serious. I want the cameras off. I want the cameras off. I want the white media out of Baltimore City until y'all are here to report the real story. Seriously. You're not reporting that. Fox News is damn sure not here. Fox News don't give a damn about it. He can't tell me move off of my street. I paid the tax dollars for this. All right. I'm not moving.
And you getting gas too. They gas never rise.
Look at us. I'm black and this is Black Baltimore. Go to the inner harbor where the National Guard is protected, the billions of dollars that is down there. That's what they developed. That's what Baltimore looks like. This is real Baltimore. No. This is where people have to wake up and wonder where they're going to go to get a meal. Right? This is when kids
people living in detrimental situations and shit.
After the peaceful protests with the dirt bikes, the only thing that ever brought East Baltimore and West Baltimore together, they sat and took the dirt bikes. Because you don't have anything. What are you going to say? What can you say that's going to benefit you? What can you say?
He's smiling, right?
Yeah.
He's smiling, right?
Smiling. We're not crazy.
Bitch ass loud.
Baltimore City police are now throwing bricks at the kids.
Come here, little fat fuck. Thug life. I mean that shit. Because these white folks see us as thugs. I don't care what y'all think. I don't care if you think you a lawyer, if you a man, if you an African American, if you whatever you think you are. We thugs and niggas to these you know? And until we own some shit, I'ma call it like it is. How you gonna be a man and we starving? Go ahead. You know? And you can walk by 5 different houses, ain't a man in either one of them mother. How we gonna be a man? How we gonna be African Americans and we out here dying? We thugs and we niggas until we set this shit right. Trust me when I tell you that shit.
After September 11th, 2001, the Homeland Security was created, and hundreds of billions of dollars was funded into it. Since 2001, it has reached an estimated $1.6 trillion and is continuing to be financed. Over 50% of funding in the U.S. has gone towards the military. So where do our priorities lie? Will the war on terror ever end? We live in a post-9/11 world, and the reality is seeping in that finance, along with military interests and an industrialized fuel-based controlled economy, serves all of our best interests, poisoning the earth and our well-being as humanity, while provoking a third world war, creating a dualistic ego-based society, expanding unhealthy byproducts of genetically modified foods, feeding the big pharma giants, with centralized control of media, control of education, control of population, while obscuring history towards its own political means, thus escalating in a conflict between government and people in opposition of one another. Tyrannical government or free humanity is where the choice lies, fear or love, darkness or light, truth or lies, nature versus ego. This is the state of the world in which we live in. The only question is, what can you do about it?
Indeed, it may be that the United States, with its overwhelming military power, has succeeded only in transforming an eventual and speculative threat into a concrete and immediate one. Now the Bush administration finds itself trying to perform the tightrope walk of building a stable and friendly government beneath the shadow of escalating violence and a growing and inevitable nationalism. The administration began its Iraq venture with an air of absolute determination, taking a kind of grim pride in defying the United Nations and doing what is right. America and Iraq will need a different kind of determination now and a newfound honesty to go with it. Don't start a major policy until you know how you're going to finish it. Because when I look at this war against the Islamic State, I don't think our leaders know how it's going to finish. And it's going to be carried to the next administration, and who knows how far it will go. And at the moment, our actions are helping this group recruit dramatically. If we look at the Islamic State in Iraq, I think there is a fair amount of evidence that it would have collapsed in certain parts of Iraq of its own internal contradictions. I think that the United States, if it has learned anything, it should have learned to stop acting against its own best interests. And I think that the U.S. has not learned that.
World wars change worlds. And if you have a global agenda, then global problems allow you to offer global solutions. And if you look how the world was transformed by the First World War and the Second World War, the world was a completely different place after both of those wars. And the idea all along has been to have a Third World War to complete the transformation into a global state with a world government and a world army dictating to the global population. And there was a letter, a controversial letter, because people dismiss it. But with the passage of events, it becomes more and more credible. And it was a letter written by a man called Albert Pike, who was a massive, massive Freemason in the United States in the 19th century. And it was to another Illuminati infamous character called Mazzini, Giuseppe Mazzini. And it detailed 3 world wars that would transform global society. And the first one described it in the terms that happened. The second one it described in terms that it happened. But, you know, you can say, well, it came to light later, so, you know, maybe they just put that in and faked the accuracy of the first 2 wars. So the credibility of what it said lies in what it said about the Third World War. And it talked about creating a conflict between the Muslim world and what it called political Zionism. And people will say, well, that's got to be a fake because there was no Zionism when that letter was supposed to be written. Well, this is an agenda that's projected a long way forward. This is why Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, and Eric Blair, George Orwell, 1984, who knew each other. Huxley taught George Orwell French at Eton College, where the royals go, and they knew each other and they became friends. And from the same sources, not least the Fabian Society in Britain, they understood the projected agenda. And we're talking there in 1932 that Huxley's book was published, 1948 that Orwell's book was published, and they are describing the society that's unfolding today at that time. And there are many, many other examples of people predicting the future who were insiders who have turned out to be incredibly accurate. So the idea that Albert Pike would know that this Zionist movement was coming and the establishment of Israel was coming is very credible when you look at the background evidence. And of course, Zionism was established not that long after this letter was supposed to be written. And so he was talking about the Muslim world being brought into a war with the political Zionism, what today we call Israel, and that this would, you know, in my terms, create a vortex that would draw in the world, in our terms, America, the European Union, NATO, into this war.
children not to do what I have done. Spend your lives in sin and misery in the house of the rising sun.